The spine is the thing that helps propel these things forward. And that's what rope flow helps build. This is why it helped my jujitsu so much, because jujitsu is a movement practice. You rotate when you sweep somebody. You rotate when you throw somebody. As anyone who wants to actually move well, you learn to improve strength and muscle while improving movement ability.
Our special guest today is an elite level powerlifter, 2 times Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Masters World Champion, and he's even competed at a high level in natural bodybuilding. I'm talking about the one and only Nsima Inyang. And he's the co-host of the wildly popular Mark Bell's Power Project. And he's contributed to over 1,000 episodes sharing knowledge on fitness, strength, and movement. I'm so excited to talk to you about this, about rope flow.
Yeah.
And the value, what I'm noticing with my wrists, with my shoulder, with my movement, with my just feeling more, a little bit more bouncy, you know, and it's like these subtle things. And I've only been doing it for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And just hanging out and doing just a little bit with the rope, it just, and to, again, bring the conscious breathing to it as well, because it's very easy if somebody's learning a skill, for example, to, you know, tense themselves up, but to find myself, to find my breath and all the different aspects, the benefits of this is crazy. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So number one, what is rope flow? And then let's dig in on the benefits.
Yeah. So rope flow was something that was invented by our friend David Weck. He started doing that back in 2004 because he mentioned that he sees everybody jumping rope and it's this syncopated pattern, but he's like, oh, what if you start doing that, right? So then he ventured down that and he pretty much created a lot of these patterns. And, you know, when I met him about 4 years ago, I think, he showed it to me. And when I looked at it, I'm like, this is a joke. Don't get me wrong. Doing and learning from all these professionals over the years, I've learned how to kind of keep an empty cup with these things and have a white belt mentality. But when I saw that, I was like, knee-jerk reaction, nah. But after I gave it a shot is when I was like, there's something here. There's something really cool here. And then after I started to improve at it, I started to notice that in jiu-jitsu, where I usually do sweeps and maybe a lot of submissions on my right side because that's where I rotate. We all have habits. We reach for our toothbrush with our right hand. We get out of our car with our left foot and we bend a certain way. We have certain specific habits that we always do as far as movement's concerned. But rope flow provides movement symmetry first. So you'll see rotating on the right, rotating on the left. Okay, so now we have movement symmetry. We're rotating on both sides of the body. You're standing up, you're shifting the weight on both sides of the body. Now you're shifting to your front leg, back leg, or if you're standing in a neutral position with both legs next to each other, you're shifting to the left, you're shifting to the right.
Right. And just for people that are listening, so we're not talking about jumping over the rope. We're talking about spinning the rope in certain ways on your side and then on your other side.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So again, I noticed that transfers into martial arts. Like, whoa, okay, my jujitsu is better just because I'm learning how to swing this rope around. But one of the other big reasons that rope flow is so effective is it teaches people how to tap into the thing that resistance training in the traditional sense has potentially worsened. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people, when we're lifting in the gym, we are taught hold the breath, Valsalva maneuver, neutral spine. Everything is neutral spine, neutral spine, neutral spine. You train in that way, and over time, you stop moving in other ways. Or you stop moving in other ways. You stop bending from your spine to go tie your shoe, and then you'll hear a physical therapist say, don't bend at your back. Neutral spine to go down and tie your shoe. You know, you stop laterally flexing, you stop rotating, you stop these movements. And now when you're running like a robot. honestly, look at a lot of bodybuilders run, or look at just a lot of people who mainly lift run. That spine isn't rotating, but those arms and legs are moving them through space. Have you ever heard of the spinal engine theory?
Oh, please.
Okay, so the spinal engine was a theory purported by Serge Grakovetsky in like the 1980. The book is dense. I don't even understand a lot of the book because when you open it, it is physics-based, okay? But the idea isn't too difficult to understand. Most biomechanists follow the idea that to propel the body through space, you use the arms and legs. Well, that makes a lot of sense. If we walk forward, we step forward and we rotate. We rotate our arms. But Serge put forward this idea that it's not just the arms and legs that propel the body through space, it's also the spine. Because if anyone were to go to YouTube spinal engine theory right now, they're going to see a video, that's a pretty famous video about that theory, where it's a torso, okay? And this man has no legs, and he has half of his arms, but he's propelling his body through space. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this guy's alive, guys, okay? And he's propelling himself through space with the rotation of his spine and the pivoting on his pelvis. Mm-hmm. So when the right shoulder comes forward, the left hip comes forward. By the way, again, no legs. His left shoulder comes forward, his right hip comes forward. He's propelling himself through space with no arms and no legs. Why is this possible? Because we have this belief, and don't get me wrong, there's this idea that to propel forward, you have to step. But the spine is the thing that helps propel these things forward. And that's what rope flow helps build. Because initially when you start the practice, you're swinging the rope with the hands. You're swinging the rope. And when you look at it also, you're like, I'm swinging the rope, right? But when you get better and when your spine gets better at moving, this contralateral movement of the spine, your spine becomes the thing that swings the rope. Your spine becomes the rotator. You're now moving your spine and rotating and moving this object through space with something that has been kept neutral for so long. That's why people quickly find a shift in the way they move, because they're simply beginning to move their spine in a different way. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Like, we had this guy, CJ Klapisa, came on our podcast recently, and he told a story and even people that are doing my foundations course for rope flow right now, a few days in, they're like, I'm walking with more balance. 50s and 60s, I'm walking with more balance. I don't feel like as shifty on my feet. The reason is their economy of movement's improving. Instead of stepping forward with a neutral spine, they're rotating into that step, rotating into that step. They're now using this thing that's been so static for so long, and it's getting hydration to the discs. All of you're starting to tap into that engine that you haven't been using for so long, right? I want to mention CJ's story real quick because it's pretty profound. CJ mentioned that he met David 4 years ago, and he did some rope flow for 3 days. Okay, CJ's a great coach, great mind, amazing programmer. He owns this gym called Gymnazo, and I believe it's in Slow, but he comes home after 3 days of just doing some basic rope flow. He cuts 10 minutes off of his run. It's not that he has used a new supplement. It's not that he's changed his form. It's that now, instead of running like this, like you see most bodybuilders and lifters run, he's rotating, and he has better, smoother economy of movement. This is why it helped my jujitsu so much, because jujitsu is a movement practice. You rotate when you sweep somebody. You rotate when you throw somebody. And now if you're able to tap into this thing and get it moving moving a human being in the way you want to move them, bam, that's why it can be so powerful.
Ooh, man, so good. Now, I've got to ask you about this, the rope itself, for people that are listening, just for them to get a visual. The people that are watching, of course, you're going to see some actual video of Nsima actually doing this, which is amazing. And again, this has become a integral part of what I'm doing on a daily basis. Like, yeah. I look forward to it, Yeah. And I just got a text from you not too long ago, and it was just like at the right time, and it just fit in. And the rope itself, you got me a starter rope to get started, because some of the other ropes, it took a little while to get to me. Yeah. And so, but I was able to get started. And our mind, especially when you see somebody like yourself doing it, who's been doing it for a while, is like, I want the big rope. So I want people to get a visual of what the rope itself looks like. This isn't like a little speed rope that you're doing, for like boxing training. Mm-hmm. Talk about the rope a little bit.
So, the rope can be looked at like we look at the weights in the gym. It gets harder as it gets heavier. But if you want to have good form and learn the foundations, you start lighter so you learn how to move, right? So if anybody starts with the rope, it's a good idea to start with a lighter rope, because heavier ropes will move, not necessarily faster, but they're going to have more inertia, and they will pull at your spine more. And if you don't know how to move with that momentum and leverage your skeletal structure to move that rope through space, you can hurt yourself, right? So with the ropes, it's good to start with a light rope, or, there's slightly heavier ropes. I have those on my website. There's a bunch of websites that have ropes. But anyway, you want to start light so that you can learn the technique. Okay, you don't want to start heavier because that's an easy way to hurt yourself. And when you're starting lighter, you can do it for a longer period of time. Heavy ropes take more energy. So you do it for a few minutes, you're like, whew, my wrists. I've never rotated my wrist that much. I'm tired now. But light ropes, you can do them for a while and you can really get the foundational movement patterns. It's one of those things where you want to, just like jujitsu, right? Jujitsu is a great example for this. And I look at rope flow like a martial art because when I first started learning jujitsu, there's all these videos on YouTube and I wanted to do all these moves. But when my foundations weren't set, like I was just making all these foundational mistakes because I was trying to rush the process of learning jujitsu concepts. But when I went and I learned my foundations and those became a part of me, learning everything else became so much easier. But when I was just seeking out different fancy movements or whatever, and like, ooh, I can do this and this and this, I was getting tapped by the most elementary foundational BS. You know what I mean? So when starting rope flow, it's a good idea to, again, start with a light rope, work on your foundations, treat it like you treat it. Don't treat it like a workout. When we were talking about breath, breathe through the nose. This isn't a practice that you ever hold your breath. And that's why, like with lifting and everything I do everything in a way that my breath guides what I do. And if I'm holding my breath, I know something's wrong. I know the weight's too heavy. I know there's something missing because I should never be holding my breath. So with the rope, it's the same deal. A lot of people have the tendency of when they start, they get a little bit nervous and they start thinking of it and then they start doing what they do in the gym.
Yeah.
It's like, no, relax, let that spine move, right? And as you get better, you just start to unlock more of your own movement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed. And by the way, just to go back a little bit, when you talked about the inputs that you get with hydrating those discs, this is so important because so much of our reality is compression, right? And there's an important aspect of reality that where they need that. We build some resilience in that. But if it's all about compression over time, you're going to be a compressed mother. What we want is also decompression. And there aren't many viable ways to do that in our normal day-to-day lives. Of course, there are simple things, hanging from a bar, getting up on a dip bar, for example. But the body has a way to still keep tension around your spine, around certain parts to not really decompress and let your spine decompress. Mm-hmm. The rope brings about such a remarkable decompression therapy, really. And to reiterate this point of the discs are non-vascular, right? So they don't get hydration directly. It's a process of remote diffusion. Like your body has to be so hydrated, have the nutrients, all the things to get to the disc. And also your discs are not a priority for your body. Like it's got to run your brain. It's got to keep your blood flow. It's got to clot your blood. And so it can be one of the last places to get the nutrition unless you're moving it. That's the key. Mm-hmm. All this other stuff tends to get moved, not your spine, not so much, even if you're strength training, because of what you just mentioned, that tension that we hold. But being able to actually move your spine is going to deliver more nutrients. It's going to help some of that blood flow and hydration. Again, it's not going directly there, like just boom like that. It's a process. But it gets the process started and facilitated in a way like few things can.
Yeah. And the amazing thing, quite a few amazing things from what you mentioned right there. You get better at moving your spine. The first day you start, you're going to look like this. And you're going to like think you're moving your spine, whereas you're really just using your arms. But each day you do it, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, whatever you feel like. The goal of rope flow is to do it and feel a little bit better afterwards. It's not to do it and feel like you beat up or just got a really good workout, but after you get experienced, you can get a really good workout. But even so, the goal is to just feel a little bit better afterwards, right? But those small inputs over time teach you how to begin to rotate the spine. I made a video about rope flow on my YouTube channel, and foundational patterns is the underhand pattern, and the underhand pattern is like walking, and the overhand pattern is actually like crawling, right? And when you do these patterns, you're now getting your spine to move in these human rotational patterns. When you walk, you have this you should be having this contralateral movement that happens. But again, and I want to say, when I'm talking about the gym, I do not think the gym is bad. And I still do certain traditional things, even though like I'd say like the normal squat and those deadlifts, like that's 5% of my type of training, right? But the barbell on the back compresses it's axial compression. It compresses the spine. It pushes you down. Gravity is constantly working against us. And we're fighting against gravity to keep ourselves upright. But if the only things that we do for exercise are compression in the gym with neutral spine, and then we have our life where we're walking and stuff, we're not doing anything that actually trains our human movement. We're not doing anything that improves it. And you mentioned decompression. A lot of people have ideas about decompression not being a real possible thing. There's nothing like disc decompression, but it's more about getting your discs back to where they should be. You compress them in the gym, you feel tighter. I mean, I don't want to talk, like, research and stuff is great, but the thing is you know how you feel. You know that you feel stiff. You know that you feel tight. You know that when you get out of bed in the morning, you wake up, you're like, you're careful. Okay. You take those ginger few steps, move around a bit. You're like, okay, you know what? Let's just wait 45 minutes. This will start to loosen up. But, there's so many people in there, and even myself, because when I used to wake up, I was like that wake up in the morning and you actually pop out of bed. Not like, okay, let's get the body. You pop out of bed because your body is where it should be. You don't go from the gym to sleep where you're waking up already just feeling tight. You do something that elongates, and you become better at bringing about this elongation as you perform the practice. So you get better at actually stretching your spine through movement, through dynamic fluid movement. Things like the Jefferson curl and these movements in the gym are good to get you training flexion and lateral flexion, etc. But like, the rope gets you doing these things in a dynamic way, both sides utilized. And that's why it ends up, this little swinging of a rope ends up being such a powerful thing.
Yeah. And just to add to that a little bit, the physics of it, especially when the rope gets a little bit heavier. And I noticed such a difference going from the training rope that you got me to when I got a heavier rope. Mm-hmm. You can feel the force as that rope goes up, pulling you against nature, like power of levity, right? And that's that decompression. It's like, again, but you're doing this while moving in a human way. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed was, I tend to catch on to things pretty quickly. I know you do too, especially new movements, things like that, because we train ourselves to do that. We've done that over time. And so thankfully I had your guidance though, because, going through your videos, like I could see, okay, there's this piece. Oh, this is like, I feel this. This is natural. And so I was just messing around, and you kept using those terms too, which is very freeing for people in the videos. Just mess around with this a little bit.
Yeah.
I was like, I can mess around. All right, I'm gonna mess around. And so I was at the park and I was just doing some of the basic rope flow. And then I just decided I felt like I needed to turn around, and I hadn't got to that part yet. And so I just I turned around, which the propeller move, which I didn't know. And I just felt like that was so natural. It just felt right. And then I started walking. Like there's certain things that just felt like the right thing to do. And then I learned about them in later videos, of course. I was like, all right, I got that one. Mm-hmm. But then there were certain things that didn't feel natural, right? Once we got to the dragon roll, for example, right? I'm just like, this seems very simple the way, but when I was trying to piece make it, and instead of flowing, like getting back, like, let me tune into myself, then it locked in. But I needed to know what the action was, right? And so your course, which you got to tell people where they can get access to this, because it would be criminal not to, because it's so good. And you detail you go through these little pieces that I didn't think about as well. Like, and even popping in and do an emphasis video of like, hey, this is another check-in to check in on your breathing. Right. So where can people get access to the course?
It's school.com, and this group is called The Stronger Human. There'll probably be something there, but I made that foundations course, and it's detailed. I made it free because when I was learning rope flow, I had to piece things together on YouTube, and that's great. You know what I mean? But the thing is, it's like, it became an inconsistent practice for me because the frustration of not having something just laid out. And I believe it took me too long to get the hang of things, just because since there was no structure, I was just like, I'll just not do it today. But I laid things out. Again, y'all can just go check it out. You can go, if you want to, you can get a rope from Home Depot. I have ropes on my website, but just get something you can start with now. Go to Home Depot, cut 9 feet of rope, and just start swinging that thing around, right? Don't make it a workout. Just swing it a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, and make it a habit, because you'll notice you'll start to, when I say it's like a martial art, you learn movements, you put movements together, and over time, the big goal is to reach a flow state. The big goal is to get to a place where you're not thinking, you're just breathing. The movements that you've done and downloaded are now just being performed. And the flow state is powerful because I can get to a flow state in jiu-jitsu at this point. I've been doing it for 9 years. I can roll with anyone and bam, I'm in, right? But it's addictive. The flow state is addictive. This is why runners, once they get to that place where they call it the runner's, hey, that's the runner's flow state. They've gone for 2 hours and it felt like 30 minutes because they're just now locomoting. They're just moving, not even thinking about anything, right? But it's dangerous when you get addicted to a flow state that really beats your body up. This is why runners get into trouble, because they just run. They're getting for that high, and that high is amazing, but that high is beating up your knees, your back, and everything. And jiu-jitsu, everyday porrada. And if you guys do jiu-jitsu, you get that one. But listen, you get to a flow state with jiu-jitsu and you can't fight people all the time. It has wear and tear on your body.
Right. It's dangerous.
It gets dangerous. And people will typically train through pain. That's somewhat part of the culture. Like when a lot of people get their black belt, they're the broken black belt. You don't get there with no scars. You got knee issues, back issues, neck issues, and it's part of the process of getting to the black belt. But the thing is like, first off, it doesn't have to be. I'm a black belt and I have no injuries, right? I used to have injuries in the past, but when I found rope flow, and again, with the ways that I train in the gym, I'm able to reach a flow state in this activity. I'm able to do martial patterns and martial movements, and I'm attenuating to this rope. And by doing that, I can now train jiu-jitsu 3 or 4 days a week. And every day I can do some form of rope flow that still allows me to achieve this state of no mind, this state of not thinking, just moving, this absolute flow where I'm like, I don't need to go to jiu-jitsu today. I can do my rope. I can do my lifts and back off a little bit, and I can feel good. Yeah. This is the thing that's going to let me do this stuff till I'm 70, 80, 90, rather than being the person who does it for a few years and I'm out because of injury.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love for you to talk about this subject. This is something which is crazy that it's a newer part of fitness conversation, which is these exercise snacks or microdosing exercise.
Yeah.
Just like most things that tend to work very well for a long time, humans have been doing this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And today, again, I think our mindset and, coming up much the same way of like, if I'm not getting in a full workout, what's the point? Like when my workout is going to the gym, get in that 45 minutes or that hour. Mm-hmm. And that's how I really get growth. That's how I really progress and move forward. Just doing, 10 pull-ups now and then, doing, 5 more times throughout the day. It's pointless. Like, what am I doing? It's nothing. So let's talk about your perspective with microdosing exercise.
The goal is just to make movement a part of life. It's, in the past for me, when I was focused on bodybuilding and powerlifting and lifting was the thing that I had my pre-workout. I get myself mentally prepared. I go to the gym. I get that done. Come back home. I chill, sit down, chill, right? But the microdose has been so powerful, and it's something we talk about on the Power Project all the time because I've set up my environment to serve my movement ability. So you go to my house, you go to my mom's place. I've got her microdosing stuff too. I have a dip bar here, 2 planche bars right here. I got a kettlebell upstairs. I got a sandbag chilling downstairs. I got a pull-up bar on the door. At the podcast office, in the podcast room, we got some stuff laying around. I got kettlebells in my car. And people will hear this and be like, this guy's a workout nut. Obviously, he has workout stuff everywhere. But it's not because I'm working out. It's because when I pass by this thing, I'm encouraged to just give it a quick pickup. Do a few squats. Just move it, right? Don't think about it. It's not a workout. It's just movement. Just go move it. Go pick up that 100-pound sandbag right there. It's just right there. Just go pick it up real quick. Don't warm up. just breathe and pick it up. And the reason why I can now breathe and pick it up is because I've built the habit in my lifting of using my breath to dictate my movement. So now I don't have to hold my breath, hype up and do something. It's movement. I can just go pick that up cold. Why? I'm not saying you should just go do this now, go get some heavy stuff and pick it up cold, but have some things around that will allow you to just get a few reps in without having to think. This is just literal lubrication for the body. But you got to think, these things add up. I know that stress and getting close to failure can help with muscle growth and all these things, and that is good. You can absolutely do that, right? You should do that at some point. But outside of that, just gently making this a part of your day, that adds up. And not just in terms of burning calories, etc. It adds up in allowing you to just become a better mover, become overall stronger. Because now over time, you got a sandbag at home or some stuff at home. Now you can just go bang out 15 pull-ups without thinking about it. Because every time you went underneath the door, you did like 3 or 4. But that stacked up each day. Maybe there were some days where you backed off because you can't just perpetually do more each day. But there are some days where you listen to your body and your body's like, could you chill a little bit? Could you not just do as much? Okay, I won't do as much. And then you have another day where you're like, okay, let's push this a little bit. But over time, there's this slow, linear type of progression up and down, but over time trends up. And now, you just do these things. It's just part of what you do because you set your environment up. And this isn't just my movement environment. This is my nutrition environment too, but you set your environment up to serve your body and serve your movement, right? Yeah. And I think that's why it can be so important. And I tell people that work in office jobs, kettlebell is amazing. Maybe have a kettlebell and maybe a slant board right there in your office. Maybe you can just pick up that bell and do a few slant board squats or do a few kettlebell lifts, or even just like do a few silent swings if you're nervous about people hearing you, but just get the movement in so that the only time where you're getting in these movements isn't just when you're in a building with, lights and 4 walls. And the days that you miss doing anything in this building are days that you just don't do any of this activity at all. I mean, obviously we can't neglect how important walking can be. So walks are super important, but that's the idea of microdosing, making movement a part of your life.
Yeah. So you can just do it. And the concept of doing something cold or doing something without warming up is a new thing, right? No other species on Earth warms up before it does something, right? The line is not warming up. Let me do a little jog before I go after this gazelle, And also, but then we could be like, well, that's all other animals. Like we're more evolved, all the things. Kids don't warm up when you get on the monkey bars. When I was going to Bruce School, elementary school, we just got up on that shit. And not only did we just go swinging on the monkey bars, I was getting on top of the monkey bars. I was doing all this dynamic stuff, and I didn't have to warm up first. Yeah. It just happens over time because we become more and more, not just sedentary, but movement deficient.
Shawn, I'm happy that you mentioned the kids thing. Because the goal that I have for myself and the goal that I have for all the people in the Stronger Human is getting back childlike movement ability. So it's not just gaining muscle and trying to put on all this tissue and lifting. It's not just that, because lifting can be good, but it's being able to move like a kid again, being able to sleep like a kid again, right? Being able to have no apprehension in the next step, next movement, next thing you're going to do because you just do it, right? The monkey bars thing you mentioned is amazing because like I'm getting a bar for at home so I can just start hanging off something, but that's, you can do that. My friend Joel Green, we've had him on the podcast twice. He's brilliant, man. The first time I met him 5 years ago, he mentioned on the podcast, he was like, and he's, by the way, 60, I think, maybe late 50s, 60s. He looks great. I have this habit of doing 5 cold sprints a day. 5 cold sprints a day. And I looked at him, and at that point in time, I was in a state where if I took a sprint, I'd pull a hamstring. So I didn't even sprint at this time. I was like, sprinting is not something I'm ever going to do now. But when I heard Joel say that, I was just like, why? And he was like, well, that's actually one very good sign of youth. Kids, like you just mentioned, kids can just do stuff. They don't have to think before they pick the thing up. They just pick it up. They can fall and get back up. Why? Because their tissues are super healthy. And that's a whole nother thing, taking care of your soft tissue. But they can just fall and pop back up. And we're like, oh, we could only do that when we're a kid. It's not just because they're a kid. It's because they have healthy tissue. They're supple. They're pliable. I sound so creepy right now. But, you can...
no diddy.
You can bring back that supple, pliable nature to your tissues so that you don't just move like a child, but like your tissues activate. They pop like a kid's tissues pop. And we lose those abilities because, like you mentioned, they're just things we stop doing, ways we stop moving. As humans, we're an amazing species because we are built for efficiency. We learn certain patterns and habits that allow us to use the least amount of energy. And when we learn how to do that, we learn how to just do things in the most comfortable way. But the most comfortable thing is typically not moving as much, not moving in certain ways as much. And when we stop doing those movements, when we stop moving in those ways, we learn, it's a learned habit to just now sit in a certain way, bend in a certain way, walk in a certain way, never sprint or jump again. Most people stop jumping. That's just one thing that they don't do. And then after a while, they're like, most people don't even think about the fact, like, think about it. I mean, comment down below, guys. When's the last time you jumped? Hopped? Have you in a while? And if you do it right now, it's probably not a good idea because I know people who've been like, oh, I haven't. They start and they pull something. So again, the thing is, I want people to understand that it's not the fact that you'll never be able to do these things again. It's the fact that you need to slowly progress yourself back to these childlike abilities, and it's possible. It's going to take you a while, as it took me a while. It takes a while, but you can do it. And then once you get it back, it's maintenance.
Yeah. The process is unlocking, and that's what I love about the rope flow as well, is that it's unlocking all these dormant things. And one of the things that you alluded to earlier is symmetry, right? Because we all tend to do things with one side of our body, whether we're, if somebody's a baseball player or plays golf, it's obviously very popular. Our form in tennis and using a certain hand for a lot of stuff. And so we have a preference towards, and it can be very unconscious using one side of our bodies versus the other. And this is giving us the ability to have more symmetry, to use that other side of our body to complement both sides of our body. And what that also is doing is unlocking our brain, because one side of our brain is controlling the opposite side of our body. And so I really feel that one of these capacities is this kind of whole brain functioning or integration that takes place. What do you think about that?
I have my thoughts about this, but I'm excited to talk to David about this weekend. But I'll give you my thoughts right now. And you alluded to swinging sports. Baseball, throw with one side. Tennis, baseball, again, you swing generally on one side. Some people are ambidextrous. Some people have, both skills with both feet, but most people don't. And the great thing about, first off, the rope is that you can train those movement patterns on both sides of the body. I don't know if you've gotten to the modules, but there are single arm throwing patterns. There are two arm throwing patterns with the rope. You learn how to do a throwing pattern on your dominant side. Then you learn how to do a throwing pattern on your non-dominant side. You learn the pattern, because the great thing about the rope is that when you're doing something on one side, then you do it on the other, the rope will teach you by hitting you. The rope will teach you that, oh, I'm not rotating as much when I do this like I do on my right. So let me try doing that rotation on that side. And oh, it wasn't as good, but it's okay. Okay. Let me do that throwing pattern again. Okay. Oh, now I'm rotating in a throwing pattern on the left side of my body, and I've never thrown a ball on the left side of my body. Let me actually go try to throw a ball with my right and my left. I have this power. That's what it's like, because now man, there's swing patterns. There's like patterns that emulate the golf swing. There's patterns that can emulate all these types of swing. But the thing is initially you're so goofy on your other side. But when you just do the reps, you're now doing the same level of rotation that you have on your dominant, on your non-dominant. And this is why, even when it comes to things like punching, I'm not a striker. I'm not someone who does striking sports. But my striking ability on both sides of my body is dangerous. I've I've purposefully started doing a lot of striking on my own just because I felt that rotational power with the ropes. I'm like, okay, let me see what this feels like. And holy crap. Like I can actually strike well with my left and my right, and I feel that powerful rotation. On the brain side of things, you mentioned something interesting because many people have different anecdotes, and I have anecdotes for myself too with this. As I started to do more with the rope and learn new patterns, your body is learning new patterns of movement, things that were so natural to you. Like for many people, throwing a ball is natural. For many, maybe throwing isn't. So you learn how to throw. You learn how to throw on the other side. You learn, and your body develops all these capacities. And over time, I'm thinking differently. I'm having new ideas on things. And I'm just like, nah, I don't want to just say it's the rope. It has to be other stuff. But like, many people have said, like, I feel like I'm getting smarter because your movement efficiency with your body is improving. So that can't just stop there with the rope, right? The way you move through life is also a reflection of the way you think. Notice that sometimes body posture plays a big deal on like how you think about people and how you look at them. I'm looking at you like this right now. You probably might be feeling like this guy's creepy. I'm crouched out a little bit on my head's here, but a lot of people, this is where they stay because this is where they feel comfortable.
Yeah, suspicious.
And when we look at these people, we're like, that person is hiding something. There's something up with them. Then there's people where it's like, they're comfortable. They move through life in that way. They have a different essence of the way they walk. You see athletes, you watch an athlete walk, a football, watch Michael Jordan walk. watch that grace. Watch LeBron James, watch any of these athletes walk. There's the way you move, it also changes the way you think, the way you activate yourself in life. It's powerful. So I don't want to say it's going to make you smarter, but I do have a feeling that as you start to move better, you'll start to think differently. I think we all know that. When you start to feel more confident, you'll start to think differently too.
Yeah, yeah. A great affirmation for this is Dr. Daniel Amen. And, he's got the world's greatest index of brain scans, of functional brain scans.
Yeah.
And so again, he's actually looking at the brain. He's involved in the big NFL study. And he shared with me, actually sitting right here in this chair, how an aspect of the brain that is really one of the largest areas of the brain is really responsible for movement, all things movement. Why would such a large part of the brain be dedicated to that? And it's a bidirectional feedback. Your movement is going to grow and sustain this part of the brain, and that part of the brain is sustaining your movement. And so if you're getting these inputs, you're literally creating all these neural connections, and you're keeping the brain, the blood flow, the activity, all that stuff is predicated on your movement. And so again, if we can start to have more integration on both sides of our body, because, we have these two hemispheres, and we start to get more integration. And this is so overlooked because it's so crazy, man. We've got this huge paradigm with movies where the athlete is the dummy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got the dumb jocks.
I drink muscles. Yes. Yeah.
And you got the smart kids who they don't lift at all, and then you've got, and it's just so silly. I can't even, I was a scholar athlete, right? I had a t-shirt, that I got for being a scholar athlete, little plaque or whatever. And, oftentimes some of the smartest people are also athletes as well. And, it's so unfortunate because the truth is when we're training our bodies, we are training our brain.
Yes.
That is just how it is. And our literacy in so many other things, as you just mentioned, like people feeling like their ideas, they feel like they're getting smarter. Our physical literacy impacts our kind of functional and our brain literacy, and we've seen this in studies with kids as well. Kids learning and performing better on whether it's reading skills tests, whether it's math tests, if they get some movement in prior to doing the testing, right? Or learning some things and then retesting after doing some movements. This goes together. We evolved as a creature, a species of movement and learning. They're together. They're one thing. We have a culture today where those two things are separate AF. You go sit down here. This is how you learn, and then you go out there and you play a little bit to get the wiggles out. What do you think about that?
Man, I have this habit now, and this is one of the reasons why, like, I love the rope, because, like you saw, I travel with that thing. I keep one with me at all times. I walk with it because, again, like, there are walking patterns. But the thing is when I start feeling stuck, I'll just go twirl my rope for a little bit. And then boom, like, so many people also in that group are like, yeah, I started building the habit of, like, I'm stuck with something. I'll just go do the rope a little bit. I come back feeling refreshed. And I think about what you just mentioned there, because I never even thought about this, but kids like to swing things. Like, kids like to throw things. It's one of these things where, like, what if we just had a bunch of small ropes for some of these kids, where it's like in classrooms where it's like, okay, and I've seen so many of these clips on Instagram of, like, these Asian countries where these kids are doing something and then they're out and they're doing their right, and then they're back in. Like, the movement, I think some of these places understand what you just mentioned, how big of a deal movement is with learning, right? So that's huge. And if everybody just had something that they could do that was not going to impact them, not going to, it's like, not going to tire them out, that was movement based. I think when you learn to use movement as a tool, you realize how it can let you solve issues that you've been solving with other things. Many people solve issues, emotional issues, spiritual hunger with food. We're feeling a little bit bad, and I've done this before too, so I'm not pointing anybody out, but feeling a little bit angry, you have an argument, you do something, you go get a donut, you eat some ice cream, you solve your issue by feeling good. And good food, or I call processed food abominations. I still have some now and then, but I call it abominations because it's not real food. Let's just be real, okay? It's calorically has calories, but it doesn't have nutrients, right? But we reach for this abomination because it makes us feel good in the moment. What if we had other tools? Like, instead of reaching for that food, we have the habit of going out and taking a walk. Because when you actually go take a walk and come back, you usually feel a little bit better. Most people don't feel bad after coming back from a walk. How about instead of something else, like, instead of reaching for the food, you go just flow, go get into a flow state. And that's why I like the rope so much, because that flow state, man, it's something else. And when you learn foundational patterns, it might not look as fancy of what you see other people doing, but you can then get into a flow where you're not in your head anymore. You're not thinking anymore. You're just in movement. You're in your body. There's this, we call it flow state here in the United States because mihai chikset mihai. But in Asian cultures, it's called mushin. I learned about that idea first from Musashi. He talked about the idea of mushin. What's his name? Takuan Sho. He wrote, it wasn't Hagakure, it was something else. But these martial artists, these samurais, this idea of mushin means no mind. That's the ideal state. That's the peak state of martial arts. Mushin is more martial based. Flow state is more like in the zone. That's why, but when they think about that, you're not in your head, right? You're not thinking. You're now in combat and you're just moving, right? You're free. Now, I know combat can be a stressful experience for many, but when you're in a flow state fighting somebody, it's not a stressful experience at all. It's actually the best feeling because there's no stress. It might look stressful to other people, but when you're in a flow state fighting somebody or grappling somebody, it actually, it feels light. And you can get into that state with a rope or, anything else that you can find that can just allow you to reach that physical flow. Find it and do it.
Yeah. So many things that we could talk about, obviously. And this has already been so powerful. And one other piece that I would like to add to the conversation, because again, you've got such a diversity of fitness experience and inputs and all, again, being able to put it all together towards something, these really incredible, it's pretty crazy. The fact that, you perform the way that you do in jiu-jitsu it's pretty crazy.
Thank you.
Because somebody would see you like, man, if they just saw you maybe just, I don't know, a certain angle, right? And they're just like, man, that's a big dude. But then to see you move like a cat, you know what I mean? It's
David
just
Weck, move like a big cat. That's been the goal.
There you go, and just like to see it all really play out and the success of that. this is something for us to really, again, it's always important for us to have a model to know that it's possible. But also in that same light, being able to have that physical strength, right? And so I want to ask you just a little bit about that and some of the most efficient and effective ways for us to build that strength. And I know, of course, strength and muscle, they're pretty synonymous. So I'm not talking about necessarily putting on a ton of muscle, but that would be nice, especially for a lot of people. But building that strength and that functional strength.
So I mentioned earlier that the breath is what dictates the way I move in the weight room. And what we need to first think about is when you start training in what I'm about to mention and the way I'm about to mention, you're going to have to lower weights. You're going to have to reduce. And the way that we have lifted in the gym, it's going to be hard for people to want to even do this because, lifting the heavy barbell, it's you brace, you breathe, and the goal is to put more weight on the bar because that's what's going to get you more muscle and strength, right? But it's getting you more muscle and strength in a way of moving that isn't going to serve you as a human being, as a fighter, as anyone who wants to actually move well. This is why actually a lot of fighters choose not to lift weights. A lot of fighters, and I'm not saying again that lifting weights is bad, but a lot of fighters choose not to lift because they feel that it makes them tight. They have this inherent feeling. And then strength coaches are like, no, it'll just help you build tissue, and it'll help you build tissue. But it does impede their movement ability, and they can feel it when they're moving. These are athletes that their skill is put forward by how good of a mover they are. Whether you're a boxer, a grappler, or whatever, the better you move, and the better technique you have, the more likelihood you have a chance to win. But what can also help you with that is how strong you are. So we got to figure out a way to do that. We got to figure out a way to stack some tissue, improve our rotational ability. And we can do that by rewinding our ideas on progression. It's not just going to be by increasing weight that we're going to progress. We're going to increase weight over time, but we're going to make sure that as we do this, we can breathe. We can inhale and exhale while moving. We can do this kettlebell work while breathing. We never hold our breath. We can pick up that sandbag. And I love the sandbag because it's a very human implement. It's almost like in picking up a child or throwing another human. You can learn to lift that sandbag with no inhibition. You go up, you exhale, lift, and you then throw it. But you've never stopped your breath. And when you see a lot of people using sandbags, there's a preparation, there's a breath hold, there's a lift, there's all of this movement inhibition. And that doesn't make sense for someone like me because I cannot have movement inhibition when I'm fighting somebody else. And also, you don't want to have movement inhibition in life. You want to be able to move through and react. That reacting is flow. Instinct is flow. You don't think, you're just moving. That's why now, if you find that you have apprehension, when you start lifting, you're holding your breath, you drop the thing. You drop the kettlebell, you put it down. Well, the way I teach people how to do this is I teach people how to lift, how to do all these things, but where breath is the main thing. And then I also teach them how to use their spinal engine, just like with the rope, but you learn how to lift while rotating the spine, lift while getting in this contralateral movement. You learn to improve strength and muscle while improving movement ability, while never letting go of your breath. If we can do all those things, then we can stack on tissue, we can improve our spinal movement, we can improve our strength, we can improve our bone density, we can do all of these things while not taking away from the way that we move as a human being. Whereas if we just focus on lifting the traditional way, it works for some, I wouldn't say it works, but people do it and they end up being okay with some of the drawbacks it has on their movement because they still have another activity. So it's like, you've seen Usain Bolt lift. We've seen all these guys lift. Usain Bolt was the fastest man in the world, right? But that was his main thing. He was a sprinter first. That movement pattern's been ingrained. So he can do things like lift in traditional ways, and it only bolsters him. But for many people who aren't good movers, who don't have a base of movement, they now don't have a base of movement, and then they go and lift in ways that actually makes them worse movers. There's no symmetry there. Now you're maybe stronger and you have more tissue, but you're worse at moving. You can't walk, you can't run, you can't sprint, you can't throw, you can't fight, but you're a little bit bigger. So the way I do things is I marry these ideas. Again, the breath dictates the progression, right? And there's ways of breathing to make sure that, there's ways of breathing just to make sure that you're safe when you're lifting. But you always follow the breath, because when you hold your breath, you stiffen up, and you don't lift something when you stiffen up. So you learn how to lift while breathing. You get things that are going to allow you to rotate and move your body in different ways. You don't shy away from flexion, extension, and all these ranges of motion. Obviously, you never do anything that hurts. You work at the edge, right? But over time, you gain more movement ability. And then this is going to be a bit of an abstract idea, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get that much into it here. But when I think about manipulating my body and lifting weights, I think about manipulating your skeletal structure. The amazing thing that compression from barbells and squats and deadlifts have done is, I think there have been studies on older individuals, older women, and the older women that have generally the most bone density are women that resistance train in that sense, right? So we know that this compression will help build bone, right? We know that lifting weights, because the muscles activate and pull on the bone, and it'll help the bones become stronger. But the big thing, I think, is like, okay, how can we get this benefit of bone density, right? And just overall tissue, more tissue, without the drawbacks that might be having. I was listening to a podcast with Peter Attia, and it was a recent one. This woman studies a lot of bone, and she was talking about, people using deadlifts and squats and lifting weights in that way. And I was thinking, why isn't anyone talking about the power of the sled? The sled is an implement that anybody can push and pull, because you have to, and I don't know if anybody can visualize this, but when you push a sled, you have to kind of like stack your structure behind it to push it through space. You have to stack your skeletal structure to move that through space. But the benefit of the sled is that you can push and pull it while breathing. You don't hold your breath, right? So for me, that's a key implement, because anybody can do it. The thing that, you put a heavy barbell on somebody's back, an old person's back, worst comes to worst, they injure themselves. They don't know how to bail. You put too much weight on a sled, they just don't move the sled. But you put enough weight on the sled, then they learn how to stack their skeletal structure, compress themselves to move it through space. They then learn how to pull a sled. Now they're getting this pulling on the skeletal structure, right? Because we know that to build more bone density, we need to compact, we need to decompress and pull out our structure, and then we need to activate the tissue around our bones so that it, again, continues to manipulate the bones and build density. The reason why I'm saying this, and I'm mentioning so much about bone density, is because there's going to be comments mentioning that this is just genetics, but my bone density earlier this year was around 7.2, my T-score. And your T-score is, if your T-score is example 0, that's the median. The median means that's the average T-score. If you're 1, you're 1 standard deviation above the norm. If you're 2, that's actually really good. You're 2 standard deviations above the norm in terms of your T-score, above the norm of your age. 3 is really good. 4 is really good. My T-score was a 7.2 earlier this year, right? So that means I'm 7.2 standard deviations above the mean. As I started and another way to build bone density, by the way, is striking. Anyone who's seen Muay Thai fighters understands that the reason why they kick a wooden pole over and over and over again is to make their shins extremely hard so that they could break somebody with their shins. It's something that Thai fighters do. It's boxers do it with their hands. So that's another thing. But within the past few months, my T-score went from 7.2 to 7.7. And I'm 32 years old. The reason I'm mentioning my age is because in this podcast where Atia was talking to this woman mentioned that you can't build new bone after 30. And the reason that made me so mad is at this place that I go get my DEXA scan done twice a year. It's called DEXA-Fit. They have people that do fitness challenges that are 30, 40, 50 that increase their bone density as they start resistance training. So it got me wondering, wait, what do you mean? This is the biggest drive in my T-score that I've had in a very long time because I've been very deliberate. But it's like these ideas about after 30, you're just going to be losing muscle because of sarcopenia. After 30, you're just going to be losing bone density because of osteopenia. These ideas that are based in research I think it can like really demotivate people, because it's not the fact that you just can't. It's the fact that if you don't change your circumstances, you don't change your habit, you don't change your environment, that's going to be you. But if you're actively doing things, and you don't got to do all the things I mentioned, but if you're actively slowly taking these steps, you can be the person that's gaining muscle tissue as they get older. That's building bone density as they get older. That's their body is actually aging in reverse. So it's just one of those things that, like, I know that was a long-winded answer, but
it's amazing.
It's frustrating when I hear those things sometimes.
Of course. It's programming as well. If you believe that, then you're going to abide by that. Mm-hmm. And now, as you mentioned, there's data affirming these things, but now we have emerging data showing that the complete opposite is true as well, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Depending on your inputs. And, it's remarkable. Actually, recently, one of my guests, she's in her mid-70s. She just started lifting when she was about 70. And she was tracking with DEXA and different, getting scans done. Mm-hmm. And she actually has 7 pounds of muscle that she developed.
Wow.
In her 70s. Mm-hmm. What? Okay. And of course, she was like, it took her, it was 4 years, mm-hmm. 4 or 5 years of training. And so she was like, it might sound like it takes a long time, but for me, like, that is amazing.
It is.
And to have stories and affirmations of that being possible, you get to pick. Mm-hmm. You get to pick. And so, man, this has been so powerful. We've covered a lot of ground, and the thing that I really want people to walk away with, take action on, and the fact that they can get access to this. Can you share again the URL to get that guidance from your rope flow training?
I believe it's school.com/thestrongerhuman. Okay. And you just, again, it's free to join that group. Once you join in, you're just going to have access to that Rope Flow Foundations course. And just do a little bit each day. Don't stress yourself out with it. This practice is meant to make you feel good. It's not meant to be something that stresses you out. It's meant to be that thing that you can turn to, that every time you do it, you just feel good afterwards. Right. And yeah, it's there. Great community. There's over 2,000 people. They're all chilling, having fun. I love those people. They're great.
Yeah. And I'm one of them. So, man, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, man. It's been dope.
I appreciate it, Shawn.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
We should just call this episode like the wonders of sitting on the floor, because, one of the reasons that we are fans of sitting on the floor is that it does force you to do this thing that we've really lost as humans, which is the ability to get up and down off the ground.